We are going to be talking about some futures and the direction of where we're going with this integration at AppDynamics, so I do have to put up some legalese for us all to enjoy. And similarly, on the ServiceNow side, we're also going to touch on some of the major investments and platform initiatives that Zaki's going to share with us around ServiceNow, so the legalese for ServiceNow as well. But to kick things off here, I'm going to pass it over to Zaki to tell you a little bit about what's happening in ServiceNow. Thanks, Zaki.
Excellent, thanks Jonah. Hello everyone, welcome New York. I'm going to spend maybe 10 minutes talking about ServiceNow, right? Everyone knows of ServiceNow as that ticketing, incident management, CMDB company out there. But the fact is, we're going on $2 billion in revenue this year. We're lucky to have strategic customers like you, over 5,000 production customers, fully in a SaaS environment, right? Hosted in our cloud with 18 global data centers out there. And as you can see, almost 5,400 employees. So what does that mean? That means we're more than ticketing, and that's what we're going to talk about today, right? And let me kind of take you through this. As we talk to CIOs out there, every CIO I've spoken to over the last 2.5 years says, we have enormous cost pressures on the business, right? The mantra of doing more with less. How do I get better negotiation power with my partners? How do I get better negotiation partner with my service providers, et cetera, right? So every executive is facing those downward pressures, both on the top line and bottom line of the business. The second is all around governance, compliance, business policies, and risk, and managing the risk in my environment, right? Whether it's customer-facing risk or internal auditing and regulations risk. And the third one, of course, is around, I want to do, faster, better, cheaper. I want to be able to move faster. I want to be able to deliver services that my consumers are asking for and work with my developers to release those services faster. But the one thing that every CIO that I've talked to keeps bringing up again and again is this notion of experience management, right? How do I deliver an intuitive experience to my end users? The end users can be my consumers that leverage my solutions, or they can be internal staff within my company where I can deliver the experience to them as a chief digital officer, right? And I'm going to kind of take you through that theme as to how ServiceNow is helping customers do this. So ServiceNow was really founded 11 years ago to do one simple thing, was to automate workflow or process from one requester to the provider, right? And how do we streamline workflow at a company and allow our consumers to deliver that workflow in an automated manner? Simply put, right? It was just task management, workflow automation, what someone can call people and process automation. And why do we need to do this? Because of this, what you're seeing on the screen here, right? Historically, when a request comes up, whether in IT, whether in HR, whether in finance, right? Whether it's case management or finance management, whatever the case might be, you're meeting those requests through various manual mechanisms, right? Whether it's email, chat, phone, and then the work is routed in various manual methods. So there was this very inefficient service delivery paradigm that existed at most enterprises. And so our founder 11 years ago basically said, how do I build a platform, and I'll talk about that in a bit, that allows me to just streamline workflow from the requester to the provider and be able to automate as much of that as possible, right? So that's the main theme that the company was built on. And now let me talk about what is that platform that we built, right? So on the bottom you see here the Nonstop Cloud, which is our SaaS-based global architecture, right? We run our own data centers, 18 global data centers out there with 5,000 production customers, over 11 million users that use those data centers every day. And we have some of the highest performance, security, and availability metrics of any SaaS provider out there, right? So that's that bottom layer there. Then in the middle, what you see is a set of key differentiated capabilities that everything we build or potentially buy leverage on the platform, right? And I'll just call out three here. One is around this notion of a single data model, right? Whatever ServiceNow builds or buys is built on this single data model, right? It's very important for you to understand that. Number two is once we have that data, now we can start to apply analytics to it and machine learning and other mechanisms to be able to manipulate, analyze, and give you insights from that data that sits together. And then the third one is really around UI, UX. How do we deliver that data, that service in a more intuitive manner to the consumer that's requesting it, right? And what you see on the top here are nothing but use cases, right? For the different functions, IT, HR, security, where security incident response is a big use case for us, where I get a vulnerability in my application or in my infrastructure, I want to be able to respond to that. Again, workflow, business process. How do I do that on the platform in an intuitive manner? Likewise with HR and IT and other functions, right? So these top 5 layers that you're looking at are nothing but use cases that we deliver leveraging the power of the platform. With that, let me kind of go one level deeper, right? So you heard David talk about this morning around the system of engagement, right? Our partners, our friends at AppDynamics are experts at discovering and understanding the application details, or what they call system of engagement. And then where we help out is really taking that data that comes in from AppDynamics into this, what we call system of action, and allowing you to go take action on that data, but to do it with the context in mind, right? And I'm going to talk about what that context is. So the first thing that we did when we built the solution is we focused on service management, right? This is really the people and process aspect of your enterprise, where we go horizontally wide across the organization and say, hey, everything from change to incident to problem to config, let us understand that and let us help you efficiently optimize or automate those processes, right? So the first layer is really that process context, if you will. The second layer is the business management layer, right? Which is all of our executives out there, right? CIOs, VP of infrastructure, VP of application, when they're running a business service, so let's take a bank. A bank is running a retail business service, right? Maybe it's the ATM service. The person that owns that service really cares about the cost of that service, the risk of that service, the availability of that service, right? And they may have a couple of other key business metrics that they care about. And that's what this business management tier is all about, is to give that executive insight and analytics into those KPIs that they want to measure for that business service, right? So the first context was that people and process context. The second one is all around those business KPIs. And the third one is what we're going to dive deeper into today, is really that IT context, right? How do I understand my infrastructure, my applications, my data stacks, and merge them with the people context that I already have and the business context, and bring them together and be able to take action based on that context that exists in this, what we call system of action, right? And I'll give you one example of how do we leverage these 3 different layers, service management, business management, ops management, all built on the single data model to deliver intuitive digital experiences out there, right? The second biggest thing for every executive these days is how do I take these monolithic apps and break them into more microservices architecture, but to be able to deliver the service that my consumers require, right? And you have 2 examples of that here. One is a simple onboarding, offboarding service for a new hire, right? At ServiceNow, we're growing leaps and bounds. We hired 900 people last year. This year, we're hiring over 1,400 people, and we're on track to hire another 2,000 next year, right? Our employee onboarding process consists of almost 4 weeks of various paperwork and processes and working with different groups to go and organize and align on getting the services you needed. So what we did was we streamlined that process where a new employee, as he comes on board, he has to interact with facilities, he has to interact with security, he has to interact with IT, he has to interact with governance, et cetera, right, finance. So what we did was we're streamlining that business process and delivering that to that employee where in the palm of his hand, he can collaborate with his team, he can fill out his day 1 paperwork, right? He may need even gym access, so he can put in for ID to get gym access, et cetera, et cetera. So we're delivering those digital experiences in such a manner, cutting across those different functions and be able to deliver them on the device of your choice. And the second one here that you see is all around operations, right? When something goes wrong at night, from an operational app development, app ownership, operations point of view, how do I react to that? Or potentially, how do I proactively manage that? And I won't go into that in depth here, but I'm going to show you that in a bit as I do the demo. So again, single system of action, allowing you to deliver end user outcomes based on those contextual services I talked about, and helping you streamline and automate those services on the platform. So drilling further into this notion of IT operations management and the challenges that those executives are talking to us about, as I said earlier. Right, first one is all about how do I get clear visibility into my services? And what I mean by that is, how do I know my assets that exist in my data centers or in Amazon or Azure or Google, right? Second, how do I understand the business services that are being delivered based on those assets that I've deployed? The assets can be applications, databases, right? Just core infrastructure. So the first challenge that most executives within IT are facing is this understanding of the visibility of my services that I'm running out there and everything that helps me deliver that. Second one is, once I have that insight, now I want to make sure that I can deliver the SLAs and the OLAs and reduce that mean time to respond when something goes wrong at night, right? So this is the second big challenge for most executives, being able to achieve those SLAs, OLAs that they're promised the business. And the third one is be able to respond to those services and make sure those services are up and running and quickly bring them back up, right? The old mantra of, release fast, but fail back even faster, right? And how do I do that? And this is a challenge that most IT executives are struggling with out there.
Yeah, definitely. So there's definitely a lot of issues facing us just around our tooling and how we deal with our environments. And most of us could probably say that these statistics reflect what we've seen, is that there's a lot of business disruption that's happening. There's a lot of problems that we deal with. And recovering and understanding root cause is a big challenge. It takes a long time. It's a waste of resources, and things could be done far more efficiently. And our goal as two different companies, AppDynamics focusing on visibility and monitoring, and ServiceNow with that action, bringing these data sets together and working together, we can enable a far more streamlined approach to identification and remediation. And so that's really the goal here with what we do.
So let's talk about that a bit more, right? And why is this a challenge today, right? You have this enormous challenge of operations, application, database, network team talking about, things from a technology point of view, right? And then you've got the business talking about business services or business applications. For example, HR may be saying, hey, I can't access my payroll application, right? Where IT is saying, hey, that server's, running out of memory or is having CPU issues, or the log space is running out on that server, right? So this translation issue between the business and the IT side is what we're aspiring to help people with, right? Again, how do we bring that business context and that IT context all in this single data model, and then allow our IT leaders like yourself to be more empowered, more enabled, and a true strategic partner back to the business based on this translation that we're helping customers do. And let me bring up the phone here. So
you missed a call, by the way.
So here's sort of the culmination of all of that data sets that I talked about that's built on that single data model coming together on the ServiceNow platform with partnership with folks like AppDynamics, right? So here, think of yourself as the VP of operations, director of ops, or even someone at the help desk, right? Level 3, level 4 application engineer. You get an alert on your phone saying that, hey, there's a high probability of a service outage in the next 30 minutes, right? So now I'm intrigued and I want to see what this is all about, right? So the first thing I want to know is, who are the users that are impacted? So right on the top widget here, you see abnormal high response time for my retail point of sale system, right? And I also see that I've got about 30 minutes, or this thing is actually going to turn into an outage or a problem, right? And how do we do this? Pretty simple, right? You get a bunch of events that turn into a bunch of alerts, that turn into a bunch of incidents, and those incidents over time either turn into a problem or an outage. And if I know that 7 out of 10 times these sets of incidents turn into an outage or a problem, guess what? I can start to reverse engineer that. I can call that machine learning, AI, whatever buzzword you want to use, but it's simply leveraging that data to say, hey, this is the pattern, and these are the sets of incidents creating these outages. You better go do something about this, right? Because this is based on past learned experience. So I've got that user context in that orange widget that you see here. Next thing I want to know as a business leader is, what's my business impact, right? So I see there's 2 services that are impacted, the cost per hour, the number of users. I can drill down further and look at the lines of businesses, manufacturing, retail, the revenue at risk per business, the users per the business unit. I can go further into the department, the location, look at the risk within that. So now again, I've got that business management context that I was talking about earlier, right? As that retail point of sales service owner, I know my user impact, I know my business impact, and now I want to work with operations and say, okay, what caused this issue? So that's where this root cause analysis, root cause identified comes in, right? And I can see it's a server. If I click on that server, I see it's a SQL server, it's non-compliant, right? I see the support group that's managing that box. I can either, click into and call them, email them, chat them, break out of this workflow and quickly get to working with them. From there, if I come back, I can see there's a memory leak. I see the potential cause of that problem, which is a change record. Again, service management, right? One of our core things is ITIL, incident problem change. So we have the change record that potentially caused this issue. From there, I want to know what are the remediation actions that have solved this issue in the past, right? Again, back to that event to alert to incident to problem timeline. I know how I solved that problem in the past, and so the system is smart enough to give you that contextual data and tell you that, hey, you can either roll back, fix, or failover, right? And then it's giving you a confidence level of each one. As you can see, failover has a 35% confidence level, which tells me, SQL failover, SQL mirroring requires some temp log cleanup, right? Other manual work, so therefore the confidence level is a bit lower. But I want to do rollback, right? That change that impacted this or caused this, so I select rollback. I can see the rollback change is already pre-approved because it was in my change management process. As I hit rollback, it's telling me the time estimate, it's giving me the high-level steps that it's going through. And this is where workflow, my main point earlier around streamlining a process, right? Making sure business rules, business policies, business management layers are intact as you take action on that process. That's what this is as I'm executing that. So as that workflow executes, you can see that I've prevented that outage. And more importantly, if I come down here, I've done various things, right? One, I've notified my service owners, right? I've documented the change, so I'm in compliant. If there's audits, I can document that. Third, I've updated my machine learning algorithms, right? So moving forward, I've learned from this data, whether it's supervised, unsupervised learning, I've learned from it and I can prevent it even faster next time, right? So this is sort of the culmination of all of that data that I talked about that's on the ServiceNow platform. And one of the key things that I actually left out here was where are we getting this data from, right? And so if you look at root cause analysis, right in the middle here, you'll see that data actually is being fed from intelligent monitoring tools like AppDynamics, right? And we're leveraging that data, ingesting that into what we call our event management operational intelligence solution, correlating that data, and then allowing you to go take action on it the way I just showed here. So with that said, why don't we turn over and go deeper into what this integration looks like that allows us to do that.
Definitely, thank you. And so you have to kind of look at the two perspectives of our respective companies and our solutions. With ServiceNow, and we'll talk a little bit about how the discovery works and what it does from that perspective, but generally it's infrastructure centric. So we're understanding the mapping and the relationships of all of the infrastructure components and obviously feeding that into the CMDB as a system of record. Now on the AppDynamics side, as many of you are familiar already, we live inside the application. We look at the transaction path and the topology of the application. So we're kind of living at two layers that obviously depend on one another. With ServiceNow, if you're talking about a business service, that's an application. But that application depends on infrastructure. So by bringing these two worlds together, this can really create a lot of useful synergy across both investments. And so what you see here essentially is that from operations management in ServiceNow and relating it back to the service management, so essentially being able to do the work that's discovered and understood, by linking these together, you create a far more efficient workflow and you can leverage that same data in two different parts of your IT processes and workflow.
Yep. And we look at this sort of service management, ops management as really, two sides of the same coin or different sides of the same coin, right? Meaning meaning that context from the IT team, bringing that with the context, as I said earlier, of the process and the business owners, and merging that together and giving you that view, as Jonah said, at the app layer or the service layer, is really the value of this, right? And then knowing, hey, once that service is affected or that application is affected, who are the users, right? What are the cost impact? What is the business impact? And then allowing you to go implement that change back to those systems that are acting up, and then over time, if you click further, we're learning from that, right? And we're starting to be more prescriptive and predictive based on that data that we're leveraging here. So here's a couple of examples of customers that have actually done this with us, right? So I'll quickly just talk through a few ones. So if you look at the 6 million outage avoidance, right? This was a gaming company, or I should say a casino company in Vegas that had 5 critical business services that generated or that impacted $1.5 million per hour if one of those services is down, right? And what we helped them do is, as Jonah said, discover those services, pull them into the CMDB, and then based on the monitoring that's coming in, we can quickly assess, hey, what change impacted which application server, impacted which business service, right? Allow you to do quicker root cause analysis that way, and then be able to go take action to go remediate that impact that happened, right? And then you can see almost a $6 million avoidance there. Time Warner is another one, right? Which is, we took almost 120,000 events per week that were generating 90,000 incidents, and based on the correlation technology that we have in the middle, we were able to reduce that from 120,000 events that resulted in 90,000 incidents down to almost 1,200 incidents, over a 90+% reduction. And as you guys can imagine what that means for level 1, level 2 support, where a lot of those incidents that we're reducing that sort of signal from the noise and helping companies be more operationally efficient through this technology.
So talking a little bit about the work between the two companies, I mean, the goals that we both talk about and that you heard today in the keynote is really about identification of problems, isolation of problems, but then also being able to get the right information into the right people's hands to resolve these issues. And the other really critical piece, whether you're talking about a cloud migration, as you saw this morning, or a data center consolidation, or shifting onto a new platform, understanding all your topologies and dependencies is critical. And AppDynamics provides a piece of that, but you also have to understand the infrastructure components as well. So by bringing these two worlds together, essentially, we provide that capability from application down to the infrastructure. And so I'm going to show you a little bit about what the integration does, and then I'm going to actually demo this for you. But the first step with what we do with the integration is first feeding in the flow map and the topology of AppDynamics into ServiceNow and into the CMDB. And then the second piece is that when there are issues that we detect in AppDynamics, so looking at baselining or any type of health rule that you have set up, we can send events into ServiceNow, but the beauty is that they correlate with that model that we've already imported. So in order to reduce events and understand the problems more quickly, it's already done for you because the topology of the application goes right into the CMDB and into ServiceNow with the integration. And so as I said, the first piece is really bringing in MapIQ, the flow map data, into ServiceNow, and you can see those. I'll show you them both in CMDB views and in event management views in ServiceNow as I demo it. And the thing that people often get confused with when you talk about mapping is really understanding the difference between infrastructure mapping and application mapping. So they're both really critical, but when you look at what ServiceNow does, they discover and crawl the infrastructure so that you can understand, based on this URL or based on this service, what are all of the servers, storage systems, network elements that are relied upon to deliver that. And AppDynamics similarly works at the application layer where we discover the transactional path. So yet another way to look at this is by what types of questions you can answer with the data. So with App Dynamics, we would see a new API. Let's say you push new code and you're calling a new provider, we would see that API call instantly as it was starting to be used. We also see all the database dependencies. So if developer pushes new code that's hitting a different Oracle system or a different back end of some kind, what is that touching? Where is it going? And then finally, from the business transaction perspective, we can see that as well. So for my critical login business transaction, where are the dependencies at the application layer? So these are the kinds of things that we answer with App Dynamics data, but there are still many other mapping type questions that ServiceNow can help you answer. Some of these may be, we have a VM, we know there's an issue on this VM, but what storage array is that VM dependent on? How is it mapped through the virtual infrastructure? Or if there's a container, where is that container hosted? And what are the dependencies on the logical or physical infrastructure? And then the same thing on the network. If you have an issue with a network port, or a server that's showing NIC errors, where is that connected to? How is it hooked up? And then finally, OS level configuration, which ServiceNow collects like DNS or LDAP or Active Directory, so that you know the dependencies. Let's say you're updating a DNS server, you don't want to take down applications. Where are the dependencies? What servers are configured to use it?
Yeah, and Jonah, I'll say there's sort of 4 business outcomes that we drive from this data, right? Number one is what we call asset management, right? Hardware, software asset management. How do I understand from a total cost of ownership point of view, from a business finance point of view, what are my assets, the sort of 3-5 year kind of burn down on those assets. So one is asset management. Second one, as Jonah said earlier, is change impact analysis, right? How do I know which change impacted which components, impacted which infrastructure and application layers, right? So that's sort of the change impact analysis is what people are driving from this integration. Third one is really around business impact analysis, right? So take that up a notch in terms of that retail point of sale service, or Jonah will show you a service on the demo, but I want to get that business understanding, that business impact analysis, right? And the third one is, or the last one is really around automation, right? Once I have this data captured and I have this configuration items in my CMDB, how do I then start to automate the life cycle of those components in whatever I want to do? Maybe it's delivery or provisioning or day 2 management, right? So those are sort of the 4 outcomes that people are driving through this integration here.
Yeah, great, thanks. And the goal is to also combine this data. We all know you have many monitoring tools. We would like you to have fewer. I'm sure you would like to have fewer as well, but for the time being, everyone has a lot of tools. And being able to bring the data from your other tools along with App Dynamics and do this correlation is really where this integration provides additional benefits.
Yep, and that correlation, so everyone has 15, 20, 30 tools. Of course, we want to get down to a handful. But the correlation, as we ingest that data on the ServiceNow platform, right? We're doing CI correlation, CMDB correlation, root cause analysis correlation, right? We're also doing time-based correlation, meaning based on past patterns, we can start to understand what those patterns are and start to correlate that way. And then the last one is supervised unsupervised learning, right? Again, based on historical data trending, we can do anomaly detection, things like that. So it's all about how do I reduce that noise that's coming from these 15, 20 different monitoring tools. And in essence, giving you the ability to consolidate the monitoring tools you have based on that data, and then of course, efficiently respond to that.
Yeah, great. And obviously we can also, and I'll show you actually this in the demo, running a remediation to fix an issue right within the operations management console. So the event management console, you can actually kick off remediations, automation. It's all integrated because it's a single ServiceNow platform.
And here, I think the key is, as we ingest that data, again, I talked about service context earlier, right? You can relate that to your changes that you planned or unplanned. You can align that to an event alert, or can be aligned to a knowledge base article on how do I go remediate that, right? So talking about remediating, impacting. You can look at your SLA tiers that you've set, SLA management function with this ServiceNow, right? So it's that full kind of context that you care about as an operational person in order for you to go take action on it. And all of that is coming together based on this data that we're ingesting.
Yeah, great. And so the other piece is ServiceNow's goal is to make everything simple and work out of the box. And so as we've been building this integration, one of the more recent enhancements is actually building a nice web-based UI to manage the integration itself. So it's easy to set up, it's easy to look at the logs and diagnose any issues with the integration itself. So it's really designed to be easy and work out of the box, which is, pretty standard practice at ServiceNow as well. So here are some example companies that are actually using the integration. We have far more that have actually deployed it, but these are a sampling of companies that currently have it deployed and are using the integration. So I'm going to start out by first showing you one of the AppDynamics demo applications, and I'm not going to kind of go through any details here, but the thing that you do want to pay attention to is that you'll note that we have 4 tiers in this application, and we also have calls going out to another application. We have a few web service calls that are to external providers. There are 4 of them. And then there are several databases and 3 message queues as well that you can see represented with the little queues. And so the first thing we do with this integration is we actually bring the data into ServiceNow, essentially into some custom tables. These are installed when you install the AppDynamics app in the ServiceNow store. And so in this e-commerce application, you'll note that we have a whole bunch of different relationships. These relationships are the same ones that you see in the flow map. So we can see all the databases, we can see the tiers, the remote services, the message queues, and we also actually bring over all of the business transactions, so you can see all of the metadata that relates the BT back to the other components, nodes and servers and everything else. The other thing that you'll note here is that when your node name in AppDynamics matches a piece of hardware in the CMDB, we automatically create a link between those. So we don't want to clutter up your CMDB with all of this metadata for all of your applications, but instead we want to link from the AppDynamics data into the CMDB. So down here, we're actually linking to a node that's in the CI hardware that was discovered by ServiceNow. So we use the reconciliation engine in ServiceNow to do that linkage. We're going to be adding a lot more linkage into ServiceNow as well. Now, there's kind of an easier way to visualize this than looking at a big table of data. They do have this great dependency viewer that makes it look a bit more useful, similar to a kind of a flow map. We can, look at the same data. And similarly, as we zoom in, we can actually also see when there are active changes or alerts that are happening on anything in here as well. So the second piece is after we have all these tables and we've populated the data, and this is kept up to date. Typically, people run this every 10 to 30 minutes, and it'll synchronize the data from AppDynamics into ServiceNow. But you can schedule it within our simple management web user interface. Now, the second piece to the integration is event management, which we were talking about. How do I take all of my event data and alerts coming from my different monitoring tools and bring it together? So we actually have 2 alerts that have been correlated together, but when you look at them separately, we have one down here, and I'm not going to go too deep, but we have one here that comes from AppDynamics that's a fetch catalog business transaction that's failing its performance baseline. And the second one is we have an alert that's coming from Nagios. A lot of you probably use Nagios to monitor your Linux servers. It's a common open source tool, saying that there's an inode issue on one of the disks. So since these are correlated together because the server that the application is running on, there's a relationship there, we know that these two issues could potentially be linked. So instead of escalating this issue to the app team, I should tell the server team to go and fix that inode issue first before we go and tell the app team that there's a problem. So we know that the root cause is likely an infrastructure problem or a server problem and not an app problem. And you can also see this visually in the map in terms of the relationships, the alert coming from the server and how it flows up to the app. So the thing that we can do is we've actually created an automation down here. And if I run the remediation, I have something that will actually free up the disk space. And so when I execute this, maybe your level 1 team, you know, you have a common issue where logs fill up the disk. We've probably seen this a million times. We either just clear it up ourselves or we write a script that'll remediate this. And when I run it, it actually will show me the workflow that's being executed within ServiceNow that goes through and essentially deletes the data on the disk. And we can see that it's actually already finished running. And when I go back to the event management dashboard.
Hey, right
on
that screen, right? I think the key thing there was, again, that as we take action, as we remediate, you can see what are the different contexts that we're managing, right? So the changes actually go to the alert screen.
Sure.
The changes, the alerts, the knowledge base articles, right? Open up the alert and you'll see
well, it
but,
cleared now because we remediated it, but
the point is, as you hit remediate, right, and then clear up that disk space, it's actually looking through your changes, your knowledge base articles, your CI dependencies, right? So it's not just blindly going and taking that action, but it's leveraging all the data that already exists in the ServiceNow platform to make sure it's done in a very controlled manner.
And so in this automation, we open a change ticket, we actually automate the entire process, but we have a history of everything that was done to actually remediate this, so you still have the tracking, which is pretty handy. So that's kind of the basics of of what the integration can do. You don't need event management unless you want to use the event correlation. The CMDB integration works fine if you're just using CMDB, but there's definitely a lot of value as you move into other products at ServiceNow. So if we could switch back to the slides, wanted to go through a couple of final kind of pieces, and the first step is, what are we doing next? So we're always improving and iterating and listening to customers on this integration. So the first thing that I said earlier is we're going to be creating more links into the CMDB. So we're working with the product management team at ServiceNow to actually deal with the App Dynamics metadata a little bit better, and we're going to be integrating further into the CMDB. The other piece of technology that we're integrating with is a new product offering from ServiceNow called Operational Metrics. So you can build these really rich dashboards with all kinds of metric data within ServiceNow, and we'll be sending data about business transactions over to ServiceNow so that you can have one place to look at the data from your business side and from your user experience, user journey as well. So we're going to be bringing data into ServiceNow in terms of metrics, and that's obviously going to allow us to leverage some additional machine learning and root cause analysis that ServiceNow has really been focused on building out. So these are some of the things that we're working on in the short-term roadmap, and Saki's going to...
Yep, and then from an overall ServiceNow point of view, as you can imagine, right, all of this data, as I said earlier, coming together on the platform, gives us the flexibility to now start to apply analytics and intelligence to that data. And so from a high level kind of roadmap or priorities point of view, right, we're still focused on how do we give you more and more insight, visibility into your infrastructure application data sets, so you make better and faster business decisions. That's all around visibility. Second one is, how do we apply supervised, unsupervised machine learning algorithms to this data, right? Jonah talked about event management. Event management already has predictive analytics engines built into that, right? Where you're doing anomaly detection and other machine learning capabilities already exist. So this is aligned with the operational metrics piece that he talked about. And then third is, how do I then go take action on that insight that I'm capturing, right? Similar to the small example we just showed, but that action can be, hey, I want to go auto route an incident, right? I want to go auto close an incident. I want to go and execute a business process, right, that expands my disk space, et cetera, right? So it's both sort of technical orchestration that we want to automate, but aligned with the business process underneath that's eventually impacted by any technology. And so that's, at a high level, what we're focused on and leveraging that data that's already on the platform. And in closing, from a ServiceNow point of view, I'll just leave you with, our key focus is looking at IT operation leaders like yourself, and how do we deliver these services to you in a really intuitive, natural, self-learning, sort of self-guiding manner, right? So we're really focused on that experience aspect that I talked about on the first slide. And why can we do that? Because of the platform, because of that business, that service, and that operational context that comes together on the platform and gives you that metadata that you care about as you go in and take action on it, right? And thirdly, with partners like AppDynamics, we're just ingesting that intelligence more and more, and leveraging that intelligence that partners like AppDynamics are feeding us to then analyze that, give you insight, and allow you to go do faster automation on the system of action.
Great. And so some of the things that we're really focused on, first is this visibility. As two companies that are working together, it's really understanding interdependencies, building this map, building the information that you need to make important decisions, whether you're going through, as I said before, a cloud migration, a data center consolidation, a major re-platforming of applications. This visibility and understanding dependencies is very key to both of our companies.
Yeah, an example of visibility is, right, in 5 seconds, we have a banking customer that has 3,000 applications, but out of those 3,000, 250 apps bring in 80% of their revenue, right? And what they do is they get audited on those apps every quarter, the revenue generating apps. So they want to know, hey, from the end user consumption layer, whether it's a URL, a Citrix end client, whatever the case might be, all the way down to the storage tier, the web, app, load balancer, database layers, et cetera. How do I map that out, build that visibility, and then when there's changes impacting anything on that critical business service that brings that much revenue to me, how can I quickly understand that, right? And that's what the visibility is. So regulatory compliance needs, as well as change impact analysis that I talked about earlier.
And that's a good point, because we didn't really touch on it, but once you have all of the metadata in the CMDB, you can then open any incident, problem, or change against it. So I could actually open an incident against a BT, or I could open an incident against a tier in an app, or a message queue. So it creates some additional ITSM workflows as well. And then the other piece that we're both focused on is really root cause analysis. And ServiceNow really brings together the operations and the service management pieces to make that far more efficient. You're going to have these teams working on the same consoles and views, and you're going to have a more seamless handoff, which ultimately leads to resolving problems fast.
And this is both reactive and proactive, right? As we get alerts where something went wrong at night, right, we can help you react to it, but then based on past patterns, based on the learnings, we can tell you things are going to get impacted before the actual problem or outage actually occurs. So that availability piece on managing your SLAs, your OLAs, reducing your mean time to respond is both reactive and proactive.
Great. And then the last one is really taking that knowledge and the information. When you look at ServiceNow, all of the change history, incident history, all of this information really can enable much greater operational efficiency, both just in terms of what happened before, what did we do to fix it, but then starting to apply that machine learning. ServiceNow is going to further enhance the ability to discover and understand how those relate to what's happening today, or maybe what's happening in a few hours from now.
Yeah, and the key here from an app owner or IT operations point of view is, when you have that application performance degradation, but if you can go to your business owner and say, hey, these are the users that are impacted, right? These are the locations, this is the cost to the business, or your leaders, our leaders are able to do that, right? And bring that context together, then you can truly take immediate action on the things that are impacted the most and that affect the business the most. So it's not just remediating fast, resolving faster, but it's doing it with that business context in mind.
Great.